Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Alicia, and I'm here to welcome you to Mental Health Monday. Today, we are talking about a very important issue. The title of our discussion today is Attention Black Women. Love should not hurt. And to talk about this topic, I'm very honored to have distinguished two professionals here to talk about the complexities of domestic violence. Please welcome Paris Williams. She is a therapist. She specializes in depression, anxiety, and abuse issues. Yes, she does. Alongside Paris today is Dr. Cris White. Cris has two doctorates. So she's Dr. Cris. One of her doctorates is in clinical psychology, and her other doctorate is in industrial organizational psychology. Welcome, Paris and Dr. Cris.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes. And before we dive into our discussion today, I do want to invite all of you all to text the word love, LOVE, to 87948, because you will receive updates on Mental Health Mondays and all of my future discussions. I want you to stay connected with me. I do pass out tips and information. And if you're interested in working with me directly, you can contact me at Coaching with Dr. Alicia. And after today, if you want to work with Dr. Cris, she don't have her information on there, but you can contact me at Coaching with Dr. Alicia, and I'll introduce you to Cris. I mean, what a treat. What a treat to have Dr. Cris with us, and especially Paris with us today. So let's get to the topic. Did y'all hear about this topic? Oh my goodness. The urgency of today's topic just happened recently about this tragic story of Rebecca Cheptegei. I think that's how you say her name. She is a very talented Olympian marathon runner from Uganda. Her life was devastatedly cut short with an incident with her boyfriend in Kenya. It was just awful. It's the fourth of a very tragic incident of women being killed by their partner in Kenya. And this really underlines a very distressing pattern of gender-based violence in across the world, not even just here in the United States, across the world. So I want to start with you, Paris. Here we have an example of Olympian. She is striving and just doing so well in her career. But at the same time, she's also a woman who is coming from violence from an intimate partner, right? How does this happen from a psychological perspective? How is it that people can compartmentalize this process of being awesome at work and things that you're doing at work, and then separating that from when you come home from training, from work, and you're having this power and control, because domestic violence is about power and control. You're having these sort of issues in your personal life. How does this happen, Paris?
Great question. So part of what you're already saying is exactly what it is. It's a way to allow people to have their own power and control in regards to their craft. So in this particular person, she's an athlete, she's a runner, she's really well known in her space. So a lot of this is another way to cope. This is the areas, one would think to say, okay, I know what I'm doing here. I'm in control. I know what's happening. Maybe it's a way to distract. It's a way to move away from what is happening out back there. Honestly, it's a temporary benefit to kind of dealing with stuff that's really hard to deal with. Unfortunately, that I want to emphasize temporary, because it's only strictly in that moment where it really happens. Obviously, we could probably get to later on why that's only just good temporarily. But yeah, I think there's a lot of ideas that saying, okay, well, that happened there, but I know how to deal with myself here, and this is where I need to stay focused in.
Oh, that makes sense. So what you're saying is that if your home life is not quite how you want it to be, a way of dealing with that is to bury yourself into your work. Is to say, I don't have control, right, over what's happening to me in my house. But what I'm going to do as a response to that is become perfect in my craft, in my work related. In this instance, this is one of 4 athletic women who are doing well athletically and burying themselves into something they can control, which is a way of not addressing the fact that your personal life is falling apart. Oh gosh, Dr. Cris, weigh in on some of this. How is it that this compartmentalization is happening with a lot of successful women, which tells us that you cannot look at somebody and tell if they're experiencing intimate partner violence? Right. What does this look like, and what are some signs in the workplace that often get overlooked?
That's a great question, because you're right. A lot of times, I think because of the shame involved, fear, not feeling safe to divulge your situation, fear of being judged, those kinds of things, a lot of victims are more hesitant to come forward. I think, when you find yourself around colleagues or friends and you're seeing signs, there's obvious things like physical signs, bruises, cuts, those kinds of things, especially. But look at some of the other contextual items, like, is this person isolating from you? So do you find that at one point before this relationship or at other times, you were able to spend time, but now all of a sudden that person can't spend time with you because they have to get home? Do you see any signs of intimidation? So when you're talking to your colleagues, or acquaintances, or even your good friends, especially, when you're listening and you're hearing signs or evidencing communication that is like reflects power and control, intimidation by the significant other or the spouse, those are definitely red flags. So those are especially, because a lot of times what you'll see too is the physical isn't always the best way to detect these things. There's ways to get around it, makeup, long sleeves, etc. So it's always good to look for some of those contextual symptoms, behaviors that tend to go along with someone who's experiencing DV, domestic violence.
Yeah, what you're saying is that sometimes it's really subtle, and you have to follow almost like your intuition. I'm like thinking about, like, you can tell when somebody's going through high stress, and you can also tell when someone's trying to cover it up. They're trying to, and just paying attention to what that might look like on the workforce. And I think what happens with a lot of employers is that they say or people who work in these types of jobs just think it's none of my business. I'm
That's
really
right.
just interested in work related stuff. I can hear you on the phone, maybe stressing out over something on the phone, but I'm going to turn a blind eye to that because that's just your problem that I want to stay out of it. So there's this culture that you're on your own and I'm staying out of it, even though we work together. It's none of my business. But I really think we need to change some of that. We need to change how it's none of my business. And people think that work environment has to be so sterile. You really should get to know someone. I know I work at a small Catholic university. So at one point, things were a little more, we got to know each other. We were collegial with each other. And so that's where like that sort of collegiality is so important in these instances. So you guys want to say something about any of that, Paris or Dr. Cris?
Well, I just want to also highlight just a couple other thoughts regarding like the behaviors. Even if you see sudden shifts, mood shifts, kind of things that kind of come, it depends on how quick it's happened. So, But if you do notice someone being irritable or something, someone, or just even their work productivity. I know we were talking about initially of how with the athlete, you know, she was really great with her craft, but then on the opposite side, the work can decline, you know, in the sense like there's things going on, you don't know what's happening. Maybe they were really, they were a little bit more on their work, and then now they've kind of like declined as far as productivity, or just as we already talked about, showing up to work, things like that. So, you know, I guess I would consider those also, you know, when you look at someone, what is happening. And a lot of people don't go into the idea of what's happening in the home life, or in the way of I guess there's a lot of judgment that shows up first. You know, and when we think about, it could be something else, like something deeper than just simply, you know, someone's being lazy, or you just have your mood swings, or whatever the words are. So anyway, but that's something to think about in that area.
Very good. Dr. Chris, did you want to add anything to that before we move on about workplace?
I mean, I absolutely want to say Paris is right. You know, I think one of the things, whether you're talking about, especially when you're talking about a work environment, but especially even in realms of being an acquaintance or even a friend, I think the sticky point or the difficult area is, do I intervene? How do I intervene? Because, you know, we want to say, oh, people's place is private. I think when we're talking about this topic, though, we have to go beyond those boundaries, because when domestic violence is involved, we're talking about safety. We're talking about potential lethality of these victims. So that is what I think goes against the grain of typical situations of why you would say, okay, no, that's their private life. Let me not intervene. And also I would say, you know, there's no harm in asking a question, right?
Yeah.
There's no harm in letting, because one of the things in asking that question is letting that colleague, friend, acquaintance know, I care.
Yeah, that's good. And you know what, Chris? Actually, considering your expertise in industrial organizational psychology, what do you think like workplaces can do to better support victims of domestic violence and ensure that it's a safe environment? Because I don't know, in my mind, I'm just thinking sometimes these men, and you know, they'll come up to your job. They'll come up to your job and cause issues because it's about jealousy and it's about control. So, you know,
right.
They are jealous of you. And it's almost like the more successful you are in your career, the more attention that you get, the more, I mean, think about these are Olympian athletes.
That's
you know,
right.
and or not even just Olympian athletes. I know doctors and lawyers and, you know, just high profile individuals who are suffering from this, partly because their spouse is jealous. Anything you want to say about that?
Exactly. Well, first of all, you know, funny thing is that when I looked at the data, there's only about a little over 60% of, there's only a little over 40% of companies who actually have domestic violence policies in place. And even fewer that have any kind of training, any kind of awareness building, any kind of resources for their employees. And here's the reason why they should care. I can't find that quote, that statistic I had earlier, but basically, you know, when domestic violence happens, I think leaders of companies would like to say, okay, that's at home, this is at work, that's none of our business. But the fact of the matter is a lot of times, in almost all cases, when you have the level of domestic violence that becomes unsafe, especially what I'm saying is beyond a one-time incident, even people are losing, you know, these victims can't go to work. Why? Because they have a black eye, because their arm is broke, because they can't walk because their leg is broke. So that translates into missed days at work. And a lot of companies or leadership would like to say, well, you know, that's on them. But here's the deal. I found the statistic. So they say the Department of Labor did a study, and they said that victims of domestic violence lose nearly $8 million days of paid work per year in the US. But here's where you get the leadership's attention. That results in $1.8 billion of loss in productivity. Okay, so now you're speaking their language. And so that's why they need to pay attention. That's why you get them to pay attention. And what companies really need to do is not just have that policy, again, that's along the leadership's kind of focus, making sure they have they're not liable, or they have the legal areas in place. But also, this is what would recommend or motivate them to have resources, to start having training, to build awareness. What does domestic violence look like? So that you have this peer-to-peer support, as well as like leadership to employee support. The support all around you in the workplace. And again, if you're talking to leadership, what that will translate for you is less of lost productivity. But what it really can manifest for the victims is safety, resources, a way to get out of the situation.
Wow, that is really interesting. So you're saying, along with this public health issue, because you have to go to the hospital and have all these resources, it is also an issue with work productivity. So turning a blind eye and not understanding these signs and symptoms of domestic violence in the workplace, it is now costing $1.8 billion. So wake up and pay attention to what's going on.
Right.
This is so enlightening, and I just want to thank everybody for joining me today. Hello, everybody. By the way, if you want to get updates on when I go live, you can text the word LOVE, LOVE, to 87948 to get updates. Y'all, follow me on Instagram, Coaching with Dr. Alicia, my Instagram. I post as much as I can on there. And of course, if you're interested in working with me, individually, couples, or family, you can find me here at coachingwithdralicia.com. And then, of course, if you want to work with Dr. Cris, you can contact her at coachingwithdralicia.com. She is on the East Coast. But she's on the
West Coast.
The West Coast. Okay, hold on. Let me just tell y'all. Dr. Cris is on the West Coast. I'm in the Midwest, and we got Paris Williams here on the East Coast. And so we got the whole country basically covered. Okay,
that's right. That's right.
Side, East side, and I'm in the Midwest, so all of us are covered here today, and we are professionals. And I think it's so important to talk about this topic. And the title of today's topic for Mental Health Monday is "Attention, Black Women. Love Shouldn't Hurt." Now, why is this important? So I did my own kind of look. I was like, what's going on with Kenya? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, what? This is the fourth incident in Kenya where there's been this sort of issue. Then I looked up Kenya. In the country of Kenya, the Bureau of National Statistics in Kenya found that 34% of the women had experienced physical violence. Okay? Then I thought to myself, what's the case in United States? Right here in United States of America, 25% of women have experienced intimate partner violence in the United States. But y'all know I'm always interested in finding out what's going on with Black folks. So I looked, what is the issue? So the Institute for Women's Policy Research, they say that in fact, 40% of Black women report experiencing intimate partner violence in their lifetime. You know what this means? This means Black women, you are safer in Kenya than you are right here in the United States. Safer in Kenya. Kenya. We think about Kenya, we think of Kenya. Now, Kenya has great cities, right? But when we think about the continent of Africa, it's always associated with this sort of view of women, right? In this certain way. So sometimes we can hear from messages like this with Miss Rebecca, may she rest in peace, right? But Black women are reporting. And it really is showcasing why we need to talk about this today, because we need help, you guys. Our communities need help, because think about 40% of women. Just think about 10 women, 10 Black women, about half of them have experienced intimate partner violence. And think about the children that are growing up in this environment. This is pervasive, and we need to address this and deal with this issue. Paris, share some insights on domestic violence is uniquely impacting us, Black women. And what would you say maybe societal factors? What is contributing to this?
So yeah, one thing that comes to mind is the idea of, when we think of, one thing I do hear a lot is you say angry Black woman, right? Like that statement, that idea of, so, in that being the case, I see a lot of people shying away against, just really reporting it, which, that is a pretty high number reporting, 40%, that's a very decent size. But the thing is like how Black women come into this is simply just, how do we learn how to, understand ourselves in the process of we're dealing with someone else, right? So the key is, I look at this and see with this misconception of angry Black woman, people, there's a lot of shame to report this. Like, what does that mean for me? Because now, let's say my partner has abused me, now is there something wrong with me? Am I not keeping up with the societal norms of I'm supposed to be this tough person, this person that's supposed to show up as you can't mess with me type, or I'm going to do something, kind of thing. Just a lot of aggressive aspects to it. And, and I think there is a lot of shame that goes with that. And so those are the things that come to mind for me when I think about, what is talked about.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It's like we're internalizing this angry Black woman stereotype. And because of that, we're not going to report it. Because in a way, it's almost like I deserve it.
Right.
This is the norm of what I deserve, because Black women internalize those stereotypes about themselves when actually you deserve to be mad. You should be upset when something like that happens to you. You have anger toward your partner when they put their hands on you and they abuse you. And remember, physical abuse is just one type of abuse. We have psychological abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, a lot of different ways in which abuse kind of surfaces itself. Physical abuse, it encompasses all of those things. Dr. Cris, what do you have to say about that?
I'm really struck by the cultural factors that really play into this higher frequency or higher incidents that occur in in the Black community versus, for example, the white community. When I was looking into the story of Rebecca, how do you say her last name, Alicia?
Cheptegei?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. One of the things that really struck me was the cultural variable of what are the traditional stereotypes or gender roles for that culture, and what seems to be happening in Kenya more so than the United States. Not to say that it's not happening in the United States. Is this idea of those athletes, including Rebecca, became their immediate and external family's breadwinners, which is that stereotypical role, especially in other cultures more than you see in like white mainstream Western cultures. That is really against the grain. And when I think now that's in Kenya, and then I think about what especially happens in America, and the fact that you already have Black men being empowered due to oppression and racism in the United States. We're talking about Kenya or the US. I think the cultural variable that comes in is, what are those expectations of following those gender roles?
You
And
know,
how does that intersect when it's turned over on its head, right? And the woman becomes that person.
yes.
I think
Yes.
it's a huge thing for us to look at.
Chris, you are nailing it right on the head. It is because we have to look at United States of America and their system of oppression, right? It's easier for a lot of Black women to get ahead than it is for Black men, because Black men are seen as way more threatening. So what does this mean in our interpersonal relationships? Is that Black women, just like the breadwinners, because if you're an Olympian runner, you're getting endorsements, you're getting money, you're getting all of this accolades, where a lot of African men and African American men are often overlooked because of the racism, right? That's there. And
That's right.
and
That's
and
right.
because of the patriarchy, thinking that this mindset of how I am less than a man because my spouse is doing better and making more money and being the breadwinner, that sort of thinking. I'm not saying this is across the board, but those numbers, come on, Chris, me and you, we took that stats class. We understand what those numbers mean, right? We understand
right.
that we have to look at this because there is something going on. Luis, look at Luis. Luis is saying, what about basic teaching? Keep your hands to yourself. Boys don't hit girls. You got to respect women. Thank you, Luis. Yes, it is this sort of thing to model respectful interactions. So thank you, Luis. Hey, I just want to say hi to people in here. Jerry is from Hawaii. Oh, look at Jerry with that nice car. Okay. And then I just want to welcome everybody. Robert is a fan of Dr. Watkins. Yes, we are. I'm a big fan. I'm his number one fan, I want to say. Yeah, so this is very interesting. One of the things that I thought about when I thought about this topic, I am teaching I'm teaching this research class this semester, and in the spring semester we're reading this book called the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, right? And so we're talking about this healthy paranoia that African Americans have with the systems of healthcare systems. But this is also true, I think, of the criminal justice system and the police departments. And I think like this is becoming such an issue, is that I'm not certain that Black women feel comfortable asking for help from systems. So if they go to the police department and file a restraining order against their partner, do they know that their spouse is going to be, or partner is going to be treated fairly? So it will have them where they just don't want to underreport. Do I go to and talk to this therapist who's typically non-Black? They're usually some white woman in the suburbs. Are they going to really understand my unique issues and what's happening here? It gets so complicated because when you come against all of the systems in place that's supposed to be there to support you, there's a mistrust.
That's right.
I don't know. Paris, you want to weigh in on this mistrust of these systems that are there that keep Black women in particular from getting help?
Yes. And systems, people, I think it's just general, like a strong mistrust. And, when we think about the idea of domestic violence, and especially being a survivor of one, it is hard to trust in general, like you said, to a therapist, to the police. One big component that goes along is vigilance, being hypervigilant. So it's like the idea of, is the partner going to come around? Who knows? There's a lot of psychological involvement there. So I think that the idea of mistrust is like a huge factor, because even when you start off with dealing with this partner that you're working with, or you're with. I mean, maybe the assumption that you're going into it with some level of trust going with this partner, and obviously this person betraying them in a heavy way, in a very strong way, and so many levels. So it's like, now who's safe? What's around me that could be safe? So yeah, I mean, it's so unfortunate in that space, and that's why a lot of survivors are under or not reporting, as you just described, because again, what will happen next? I think Chris or Dr. Chris was mentioning this before, where, if I do report this, then what? Will I be a target again? Will something worse happen to me now, or will their friends reach out to me? Will there, just so many aspects of the world and what to do with it. Like, I don't know who to trust. Even when we think of a friend, a friend will come to you like, oh, just leave this person or go to the police, just, right? And not really acknowledging that there's so much more involved emotionally, physically. There's so much harder than just simply doing. So, then that's why the person doesn't speak about it, because now it's like, okay, well, they don't really understand me. This friend doesn't really understand where I'm at, and things like that. So just to, that's a strong component. I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Alicia.
Yeah, and it seems like R. McClure agrees with us. Look at her sitting there. Yeah, American abused women must turn to a systemic oppressive systemic system for help. Yes, that is so true. You have to turn, like, where else do you go? You really have to turn to these issues. And I mean, it is a legitimate thing. You call the police and the police comes to your house, and you don't know what's going to happen when they get there. We don't know what's in the mind of these police officers. We're afraid of law enforcement for good reasons.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I mean, so the issue is that, and meanwhile, we still have a lot of hurt families that continue to suffer. And you made a great point, Paris. Why don't you just leave?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? I don't think that's the best advice.
Mm-hmm.
The best advice is what Dr. Chris mentioned, is safety.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to someone about how to be safe, and actually not encouraging them to leave, because what do we know about women that try to leave an abusive situation? It's frightening, and it is potentially dangerous. It's something that you need to prepare for. You need to get everything, your ducks in a row, in order to be in a situation where you feel safe. Mm-hmm. It's all about safety with Dr. Chris. Did you want to say more about what could be some answers, solutions to this? Because people cannot just leave these once you're in this abusive cycle. Yeah. And what can you do to get out of it other than just leave? Dr. Chris, you want to talk about that?
So thank you so much, Dr. Alicia, for highlighting that point, because I think a common misconception is that once you leave, you're safe. And as a matter of fact, I think the first 24 hours that you leave a domestic violence situation is the most dangerous. And it's especially even more dangerous if you're pregnant, if you're a woman and pregnant.
Yes.
So yeah, it's definitely, if I could say, if there's one thing to bring awareness to the general population about this topic, or people in their lives that may be experiencing this, it's not that easy. And so a safety plan is absolutely essential, right? So what we mean by safety plan is helping, if you're a bystander, witness, or otherwise have a friend that is going through this, you want to help them determine, basically set up the scenario where when they need to leave, they can leave. So working with them to figure out where they're going to go, where is that safe place they're going to go to. Having things like a burner phone or a separate phone from their cell phone, because contact from that perpetrator, that domestic violence perpetrator, is of the essence. Let's see. You also want to recommend maybe having a code word where your family and friends know that that code word means you're in danger, right? Because here's the thing, when you're in the middle of the situation, maybe, maybe the time that they need to get out is the next time that abuse hits, that violence is occurring. They can't get on the phone, during that time. That perpetrator is not going to allow that to happen. And so having a code word, whether you text it or you call it, having a go bag. I don't know, having a go bag, having those absolutely important documents that you need for yourself, or if you have children, for your children, any other items that you absolutely need. You want to have like clothes ready to go. So you want to have, options where to go. You want to have code words for your people. You want to have a go bag. So if it happens and you need to go, because especially when it comes to domestic violence, there comes a point where you don't know if that next incident is going to be lethal.
Yeah.
Right. Or fatal. And so you want to be ready for that incident too. Even if it has not, even if your friend or acquaintance or coworker who's going through it doesn't feel like it's gone there, it's okay. You can still plan for it. There's no harm in planning for it. So that's absolutely important. And then I would think one other thing might be too is, again, to prepare for incidences where you want to leave, where that person, the perpetrator that's doing the violence, is violent towards you, is present, having excuses ready to go about why you need to go.
Yeah.
My boss is calling me. And it has, that is particularly, I think, pivot, or is particularly important too, from the perspective of, don't have that conversation thinking like it's a typical situation that a person can just leave their environment. Have that conversation, because in a way where you remember that that perpetrator is controlling and intimidating that person. They're isolating them, right? So it's got to be good excuses. They got to be valid and good excuses. It can't be like, oh, I'm gonna go down the road to see my best friend, because guess what? That perpetrator is going to prohibit that, especially if you're in the middle of a actual dispute.
Yeah, I think this is really good. I like the list of things that you talked about with safety planning and getting a neighbor involved. You have to have your trusted person who's aware of what's going on and can support you when you're in that situation where you feel like safety is a problem. And it's particularly an issue when there's children involved, because chances are, what did cognitive warfare saying, get out? Well, you can't get out. You got kids with this person. It is so difficult to get out when you have children. You'll be connected to this person in some form or fashion forever. So safety is a big issue, particularly for the children. And remember, domestic violence is not about anger management.
No.
It is about power, and it is about control, and these ideas about women and where they should be in life and everything. So as we wrap up today, let's have Paris say last parting words and where people can find you. Chime in about this entire topic today.
Yes. I also want to quickly add a little bit more to what Dr. Cris said, because one thing I do think is super important is, we're talking about safety plan and things like that, but the other piece that of the survivor, there's a lot of psychological aspects showing up, right? So you think of like you said, Dr. Alicia, you mentioned about the abusive cycle. And sometimes it doesn't just leave, like even if all the safety planning is taking place and we went to this next place, you never know what could happen after. They could come back, meaning the survivor going back to the perpetrator, to the person who's harmed. So, we have to really consider another major factor of, and this is just to the people who are going there, like it may happen again. This may be a cycle. And again, so part of the work is about looking at psychological help, looking at a therapist. And I know we talked about these systems in place. Sometimes it's hard to really speak up and talk about these things, but part of it is even examining self. What about what's happening for me, and really looking at this in a more deeper way. And, and kind of, and part of this work is again, like maybe allowing and not just getting away, but also seeking the psychological support groups, because there are those available. There's the domestic abuse support groups. I have them actually listed here. One is called National Domestic Violence Hotline. There's a phone number one could call, 1-800-799-SAFE. There's also a website, which is www.ndvh, National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is all the acronym for those letters. So just something to think about, and then of course therapy, right? It just, as me being a therapist and Dr. Cris being a therapist, Dr. Alicia being a therapist, part of the work is really, how do we tackle these cycles? How do we tackle these domestic violence cycles, so it's not just simply just like the physical planning, but how do we emotionally plan for what's happening for us? And I think that's really important. So yes, so to reach me, to kind of segue into that, my business is Paris L. Williams, LMHC. You can email me at pariswilliamslmhc@gmail.com. I could be found through Therapy for Black Girls. It's a third-party website, but you could just Google my name, go into that space and put in my name, Paris Williams, as well as helloalma.com. There's another third party. You could just put in my name, Paris Williams. I'm in New York City, New York State. I do service clients from New York. So, and I mean, it's been a pleasure being here and meeting everyone here and talking about this.
Yes, thank you, Paris. Paris, you bring a really good point up about the attempts. It really takes, I think it's like 7 attempts.
Yes, 7.
Of someone to try to get out of an abusive situation before they actually get out of it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the chances are they leave and then they come back because there's still some things that need to be worked through. And it's not always easy to leave. I mean, think about the financial issues. You have children with this person. There is some love there. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to be with everybody you love. If you love that person, don't mean you need to be with them. That don't make a good partnership, clearly. So, there could be some reasons, anyway, perpetrators of domestic violence, a lot of times they come from a very unsafe place for themselves. So if you identify with some of that and connect with some of that, it's easy to make excuses. You think you can love somebody through their pain and their dysfunction, and you cannot. You can't. You cannot love somebody through their pain and dysfunction. If they have a troubled childhood and they're not willing to address any of those issues and they take those issues out on you, you do not need to stay just cutting through some of the myth there. You cannot do that. So anyway, Cris, you can wrap up and tell everybody how to meet you. Actually, people can reach out to Cris. Y'all don't know. We're therapists. We're not public speakers, but we are damn good at what we do. If you want to hear somebody who's a public speaker, you can go look at my husband on his channel. That's what he's been doing for 30 years. But for 30 years, we've been doing the work, and for a very long time. So we know what we're talking about, and we spend all day listening. And so now we're talking. So anyway, thank you, Brian, for reaching out to us. Thank you. He loves the content. Come back next Monday, Brian. Woo, we got a good topic next Monday. And by the way, if you want to meet with me, wrong one. Oh, text love, not morning. Text love to 87948. And you'll get information about next Monday. I'm having them back on, so y'all get used to their faces. But Cris, to end the show today, anything you have to say, parting words? They know to reach you. They can go to coachingwithdralicia.com. I shuffle them over to your way because there's enough people that need some therapy here. Anything you want to say?
I just want to say thank you for having me. This is such an important topic. There's clearly we can see from the data that there's a lot of need out there. And I appreciate especially Paris's comments recently about, needing to deal with the emotional aspects. I think I was especially focusing on, what if you're a friend or an acquaintance or witness? And it's so important to really find a way to support these victims. It is not an easy situation. And it's as we know with the Black community, especially, it's not always the resources and people that are available aren't always safe. So thank you again so much for having me and letting me kind of share the information I have. I certainly hope going forward that, we can further organizations getting involved to be just another aspect of the community that helps to stamp out the frequency of domestic violence all around.
Beautiful, beautiful, Dr. Cris. Okay, you guys, I'll see y'all next Monday. We'll see. Follow me on Instagram. I'll put up a post about who's going to be on and what's going to be on. But anyway, thank you to Paris. Thank you, Dr. Cris, for joining us. Don't forget, Mondays, 8:15 Eastern Standard Time. Be part of the dialogue. And look at the show notes. They give you information on who to contact and who to reach out to for if you need help with domestic violence. Goodbye, everybody.